Welcome back to Griffonomics, where we conduct financial investigations to define the risk before we look at the reward. Today, we're diving into Lineage Cell Therapeutics, Inc., LCTX, a company that isn't just, treating degenerative diseases, but aiming to replace the damaged human hardware entirely using factory-made biological parts.
It's a fascinating space. Lineage is truly pioneering the frontier of regenerative medicine. They are entirely focused on utilizing an allogeneic or off-the-shelf stem cell platform.
Off the shelf, so one size fits all, basically.
In a way, yes. The goal is to mass-produce replacement tissue, be it for the eye, the spinal cord, the pancreas, or even the auditory system, to restore function where it has been permanently lost.
So you're not just patching the problem, you're swapping out the broken part.
Exactly. It's a high-risk, high-reward proposition built on a highly differentiated technical foundation, and right now the market is pricing in enormous potential for platform validation.
And what does the financial blueprint of that proposition look like right now, given that massive risk-reward skew? Give us the immediate data-driven thesis we need to ground this deep dive.
Okay, the bottom line is this. LCTX is a speculative cell therapy buy, centered on its #replace and restore allogeneic platform and OpRegen's restorative clinical data. Betting the $670 million Roche collaboration and multi-asset growth strategy will fund a runway beyond Q2 2027, despite a $467.8 million accumulated deficit and high geopolitical legal risk.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting with a massive accumulated deficit and a high-stakes bet on future funding. I mean, that number, $467 million, it just jumps off the page.
That's a big number.
When we talk about a speculative stock in the biotech space, we know the balance sheet is going to reflect the gargantuan research and development costs involved in pioneering this kind of field.
Exactly. When we first look at the financial reality, the numbers reflect that heavy lift inherent in translational medicine. As of September 30, 2025, Lineage held $40.5 million in cash and equivalents.
$40.5 million. Okay, that's their immediate war chest.
Right. That is a critical figure to anchor the immediate liquidity picture. But investors must also acknowledge the historical hole they are digging out of. The company has incurred that massive total $467.8 million accumulated deficit since inception.
Wow.
And they're fully transparent that operating losses are expected to continue as they push these programs through costly clinical trials. So that historical burn rate is always a shadow looming over the stock.
A near $500 million deficit is an alarming hole. How do they realistically bridge that gap, even with the current cash position? Doesn't that historical burn rate suggest they'll be back to the equity markets for dilution in short order?
That is the natural concern, and it's the right question to ask. But this is where their non-dilutive strategy becomes critical to the investment thesis. Management cites that their current capital base is expected to fund planned operations into Q2 2027.
Q2 2027. So they have a decent runway.
They do. And crucially, that guidance represents an extension of their prior capital projection. That breathing room is primarily attributed to cash they have already successfully received from the William Demant Investigator, the WDI Alliance for the Hearing Loss Program, which we will definitely get into later.
So they're using partner money, not shareholder money, to extend their life.
Precisely. They are strategically leveraging external, non-dilutive capital, meaning money that doesn't dilute existing shareholders, to effectively stretch their operating runway. It's a deliberate and I'd say necessary move for a company operating with such heavy R&D costs.
That focus on non-dilutive funding seems smart, but let's talk about a figure that popped up in their most recent financials, a large Q3 2025 net loss of nearly $29.8 million. That sounds alarming on its face and sort of suggests a heavy burn, regardless of the runway extension. What drove that figure?
That's a perfect example of why you have to look beyond the top-line loss figure, especially in early-stage biotech. The bulk of that quarterly loss, specifically $26.6 million, was a non-cash adjustment known as a warrant liability remeasurement.
Okay, a non-cash adjustment. So it's an accounting thing, not them actually burning through $26 million in cash.
Correct. The mechanics here are, well, they're counterintuitive. Liability classified warrants are obligations on the balance sheet, usually because they contain features that require mandatory cash settlement or provide price protection that prevents them from being simple equity instruments.
So it's essentially an accounting liability that fluctuates with the stock price.
Precisely. And what's fascinating and really kind of a positive signal is that this specific accounting loss was triggered by a remarkably positive development: an increase in the company's common share price during the quarter.
Wait, the loss was caused by the stock price going up?
Yes. When the market price of the common share goes up, the fair value of those liability-classified warrants also increases because the company's future obligation to settle them potentially costs more. The company has to record that increase in liability as a non-cash expense.
So paradoxically, a large technical $26.6 million loss was actually a direct sign of market optimism and increased share price performance.
You got it. This kind of financial detail really defines the complexity of assessing speculative biotechs. You can't just look at the headline number.
That clarifies the breathing room and the financial nuance. So they've bought themselves time, partially through external funding. Let's pivot now to what makes that funding possible. The core technology. They call it the allogeneic advantage, and I guess some might call it the manufacturing moat.
It absolutely is the central value proposition. The core concept here is crucial. They use an allogeneic off-the-shelf platform. This is fundamentally different from the custom patient-specific autologous therapies like some high-profile CAR T treatments, which are just profoundly expensive.
Right, the ones where they take your own cells out, engineer them, and put them back in.
Exactly. Autologous therapies require harvesting a patient's own cells, shipping them to a lab, genetically engineering them, expanding them, and shipping them back for return infusion into the same patient. That customized single-batch process is an economic and logistical nightmare for scaling.
So LCTX's approach is designed to be a universal product, a standardized kit ready for injection into anyone, and also, crucially, to minimize the rejection risk inherent in using foreign cells.
Exactly right. It's intended to be a one-time treatment delivered to anyone, streamlining everything from logistics to cost. The CEO, Brian Culley, he views affordable, scalable manufacturing as the absolute table stakes for success in this field.
Table stakes meaning you can't even play the game without it.
You can't, especially if you aim for large patient populations like dry AMD or type 1 diabetes. If you can only produce enough for a handful of wealthy patients, you've just performed a scientific demonstration, not created a commercial industry.
Walk us through how they achieve that scalability. It sounds like they've solved some industrial problems that plague other cell therapy companies who rely on, small-scale flask cultures.
They have. They've engineered their process for industrial efficiency. The journey starts with pluripotent stem cells, or PSCs.
The master cell.
The master cells, yes. These are the cells that can theoretically differentiate into any tissue type in the body. And because PSCs can self-renew indefinitely, they are essentially immortal in culture, they provide an endless supply of starting material.
So right there, you avoid the limitations of donor tissue supply that hamstring many other regenerative therapies.
You've completely sidestepped that bottleneck. But that solves the supply problem, but then comes the complexity. How do you convince that master cell to become only the specific cell type you need, like a retinal cell or a spinal nerve cell, and do it in massive quantities?
Right, without it turning into something you don't want.
That's the proprietary secret sauce, the guided differentiation process. Lineage uses meticulous in-house protocols, all under cGMP, which is current good manufacturing practice, to turn those master cells into highly pure, specific, and consistent cell types needed for therapy. They are, in essence, guiding the cell's destiny.
And how large is the scale we were talking about compared to traditional methods? What does that look like in practice?
This is where the physical engineering is critical. They utilize a sophisticated manufacturing setup using a dynamic culturing system, specifically 3D bioreactors.
Okay, so not the flat petri dishes we imagine from high school science class.
Not at all. Contrast this with traditional 2D flat flasks, which yield relatively small batches. The 3D bioreactors allow cells to grow in 3 dimensions, mimicking a more natural environment and allowing for immense scale-up. It's like going from baking a single loaf of bread to running a massive, continuous industrial bakery.
And what's the output?
They have successfully demonstrated the capacity to produce more than 2,500 treatment courses per 3-liter batch of retinal pigment epithelial, or RPE cells, for their lead drug, OpRegen.
2,500 treatments from a 3-liter batch. That's incredible.
It is. Think of the staggering economic difference between making a single, custom treatment for one person versus making thousands of standardized, quality-controlled doses from one relatively small batch.
That drastically changes the cost of goods equation and, more importantly, makes the therapy accessible. And the final product itself is engineered for clinical application, not just lab use, right?
Absolutely. The end result is designed to maximize commercial uptake. The product is a ready-to-inject formulation that can be stored, thawed, and administered in a matter of minutes.
Minutes.
We're talking about minute-long administration during the surgical procedure. That simplification of logistics, administration, and patient workflow supports a very low cost of goods, streamlines the hospital process, and is a key competitive differentiator in a market still dealing with complex, high-cost logistics for cell therapy.
So the moat isn't just the cells, it's the whole industrial process from start to finish.
That's it. This focus on industrial scale and low cost is what truly validates their platform as a core asset.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because that scalable platform is anchored by their lead asset, OpRegen. This is the program that truly validates the technology, and it's partnered worldwide with the behemoth Roche Genentech in a deal potentially worth up to $670 million for dry age-related macular degeneration with geographic atrophy.
Yeah.
The $670 million figure alone suggests Roche's massive commercial value here.
OpRegen is unequivocally the main value driver. And what's compelling is the operational momentum Roche is showing, which suggests they are fully committed to advancing this beyond just the discovery stage.
What does that momentum look like?
Well, for one, Roche is currently running the Galette Phase 2A study, and they are actively focusing on surgical optimization. This isn't just passive enrollment. They are evaluating 2 proprietary surgical delivery devices specifically acquired or developed for the OpRegen program.
So they're not just testing the drug, they're perfecting the delivery method. That's a sign of serious commitment.
It is. They are trying to optimize the procedure to maximize cell survival and clinical delivery, showing deep technical commitment to commercialization, not just research.
We've also seen reports of site acceleration for that trial. Does that correlate with genuine confidence from a massive partner like Roche?
It absolutely correlates with execution confidence and, I think, increased conviction. Management highlighted a rapid acceleration. 8 new clinical sites were opened in the 6 months leading up to Q3 2025. That brings the total to 15 unique locations.
8 new sites in 6 months. How does that compare to before?
It contrasts sharply with only a single site opened in all of 2024.
Wow.
That kind of rapid site expansion suggests Roche is confident in execution, enrollment, and the safety profile. Furthermore, and this is a critical positive signal, when Roche streamlined its pipeline and eliminated numerous other programs, OpRegen was specifically not affected.
So it survived the cuts.
It did. That retention confirms its perceived high value within a large, highly disciplined pharmaceutical organization.
Let's get to the science. Let's discuss the clinical data from the Phase 12A trial, because this is the foundation of the entire bull case. And the reason Roche is willing to put up to $670 million on the table, what did the trial show that was so striking and unprecedented?
The Phase 12A data, particularly from Cohort 4, showed an effect that many in the field had previously deemed impossible for this irreversible disease. We're talking about genuine retinal restoration, not just slowing the decline.
Actual restoration.
Yes. Specifically, patients with extensive coverage of the atrophic areas was a small group. N5 showed average plus 9.0 ETDRS letter visual gains sustained over an impressive period of 36 months following a single injection.
Wait, 9 letters of gain over 3 years that's monumental. For the listener who doesn't track ophthalmology trials, what does a 9-letter gain mean in the context of dry AMD?
It's life-changing. Dry AMD with geographic atrophy is defined by irreversible progressive loss of those RPE cells, leading to a steady, predictable decline in vision. The standard expectation in this disease is either stability or, more likely, continued loss.
So the best you can hope for is to not get worse.
Typically, yes. To achieve a sustained, durable gain of 9 letters, which can be the difference between being legally blind and retaining functional reading ability, is profoundly restorative. The effect is durable and is the opposite of the natural progression of dry AMD.
And this functional gain wasn't just transient, it was backed up by anatomical proof, which I know is the gold standard for regenerative medicine. You mentioned the reappearance of the external limiting membrane. Why does anatomical restoration matter, and what exactly is the ELM?
And anatomical proof is everything, because it shows the cell replacement is actually fixing the underlying biological damage, not just causing some temporary effect. The external limiting membrane, or ELM, is a crucial microscopic structure that acts as a tight barrier separating the light-sensing part of the retina from the supporting layers. When the RPE cells die in AMD, the entire architecture starts to break down, including the ELM, which just disappears in the area of atrophy. What they saw using OCT imaging was clear proof that the injection of OpRegen RPE cells was associated with the anatomical restoration of these layers,
You mean the layers were literally growing back?
including the reappearance and normalization of the ELM. It was rebuilding itself.
So if the retina cannot spontaneously regrow tissue, and the CEO himself described observing a reversion of their condition that he called impossible to achieve naturally, are we essentially talking about science fiction turning into medical reality here?
In essence, yes, it looks that way. OpRegen appears to be doing exactly what the platform promises, replacing the lost cell function, allowing the native retinal architecture to rebuild, and doing so durably for at least 3 years post-injection. This anatomical and functional reversal is the core of the bull case. It suggests that the allogeneic platform works as intended for a widespread, previously irreversible disease.
That data creates the foundational value, but let's connect it back to the financials. What is the near-term financial payoff tied directly to Roche's next clinical move?
Right, so the clinical success of OpRegen is tied to a substantial non-dilutive capital catalyst that could hit very soon. Lineage could receive up to $37 million in warrant capital upon Roche's public disclosure of its intent to advance OpRegen into a controlled clinical trial.
So, Roche announcing they are moving into a phase 2 or 3 with a comparator arm, a true commercial pathway trial, unlocks that cash.
Precisely. And achieving this milestone would be a double win. It would not only represent massive external validation of the program by a leading pharmaceutical partner, which is the most valuable form of third-party endorsement you can get, but it would also unlock a significant cash infusion that further extends Lineage's runway beyond Q2 2027 without requiring them to dilute shareholders.
A clean validation and a clean capital infusion all wrapped up in one event.
You got it.
Moving beyond the lead asset, Lineage is pursuing a multi-asset strategy, but they are doing it smartly. They recognize they cannot fund the clinical development of 4 multi-million-dollar programs simultaneously alone, so they are leveraging external grants and partnerships to de-risk high-cost early-stage programs.
This partnership model is their operational blueprint for growth, especially in a difficult capital market. Their second clinical program, OPC1, which targets spinal cord injury, or SCI, is a perfect example of how they are leveraging both long-term safety data and external funding for high-need indications.
Let's look at the safety profile for OPC1 first. Spinal cord injury involves high surgical risk, and historically, early cell therapies have had significant concerns about safety, like the formation of teratomas or cysts.
That historical fear, which is often associated with undifferentiated or poorly controlled stem cell products, is a major barrier to acceptance. OPC1 directly addresses it with exceptional long-term safety data. Earlier trials have shown participants followed for up to 13 years.
13 years, that's a lot of data.
It is. And in that time, there have been no growing tumors or cysts reported. In fact, across all adverse events reported for OPC1, only one was even potentially related to the cell therapy itself, and that was mild and transient. This decade-plus of safety data in highly complex patients provides a significant and, frankly, necessary foundation for advancing the program into broader trials.
Okay, so it's safe. What functional gains have they seen in those early trials that give them the confidence to proceed?
The clinical wins are profound in terms of functional activity. Earlier phase 12A trials show that 32% of patients gained plus 2 motor levels of improvement in their upper extremities.
32%, nearly a third of patients.
Yes, and we need to emphasize that these are not marginal or statistical improvements. These are clinically meaningful functional gains.
Explain the meaning of a +2 motor level improvement to a non-specialist. How does that translate to daily life for an SCI patient?
A motor level is measured based on muscle function and strength. Gaining 2 levels in the upper extremities can mean the difference between having no functional movement in the hands and being able to grasp, use a computer, feed oneself, or perform transfers without assistance.
That's independence.
It's a huge shift in independence.
Yeah.
We are talking about moving a patient from needing a full-time, 24-hour attendant to having the functional capacity for tasks like preparing food or up to 4 hours of self-directed housework capacity. That shift restores autonomy, drastically reduces lifetime care costs, and just transforms quality of life.
And what's the focus of the current study, DOSED, which is now leveraging this positive data?
The Hadasit study is evaluating a novel delivery device designed to improve the administration of OPC1 directly into the spinal parenchyma. It allows for administration without requiring physicians to temporarily stop patient ventilation during the procedure, which is a big deal.
A procedural improvement.
Yes. But crucially, the trial is notable because it is dosing chronic SCI patients, those who are 1 to 5 years post-injury, for the very first time.
Why is that so important?
Because chronic patients represent the vast majority of the SCI population globally. Most trials focus on acute injury right after it happens. Successfully reaching this chronic group opens up the largest, most commercially relevant market segment.
And their operational strategy is visible here too, right? What about that external funding mechanism for OPC1?
They are actively pursuing external support to mitigate the cost of the DOSEED study. Lineage is a finalist for approximately $7 million of additional funding from the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, or CIRM, to help reimburse costs.
$7 million from CIRM. When do they find out?
A decision is expected in December 2025. Now, while management confirmed the program will continue even without the grant, securing that non-dilutive capital would obviously enable faster site expansion and more aggressive recruitment. It just accelerates the pathway to further milestones.
This strategy of speed, small investment, and external funding is even more evident in their resonance program, targeting hearing loss. The platform demonstrated its rapid ability to pivot to a new tissue type.
Absolutely. The speed of the platform demonstrated here is truly impressive. The Resonance program, which uses auditory neuron progenitor cells, ANP1, to treat sensorineural hearing loss, was conceived, developed, and advanced all the way to a fully funded partnership in approximately 1 year.
1 year from concept to partnership. And how much did that initial work cost them?
Management noted that this initial work required only a modest initial investment of less than $1 million, which is a trivial amount considering the complexity of the field.
And that small, rapid initial investment paved the way for a major non-dilutive commitment to carry the heavy preclinical lifting.
Correct. The program's preclinical development is now fully funded by $12 million in non-dilutive capital from William Demant Invest, or WDI. Yeah, WDI is an evergreen investor focused on the hearing healthcare ecosystem. So this collaboration is the quintessential example of Lineage's strategy. Identify a high-risk, early-stage program, rapidly use their manufacturing platform to generate a compelling candidate, and then leverage outside experts like WDI who have deep domain knowledge in auditory health and their non-dilutive capital to advance it without relying on shareholder dilution.
It validates the platform's versatility and the company's capital discipline.
Exactly.
Now let's discuss the enormous challenge presented by the newest program, ILT1 for type 1 diabetes. This program takes their renowned manufacturing expertise and pushes it to a biological ceiling that is orders of magnitude beyond their current commercial success.
It's a huge leap. The initiation of the ILT1 program is less about immediate clinical success and entirely about addressing the foundational manufacturing deficiency for replacement islet cells.
The manufacturing problem.
Right. If they can solve this problem, they can effectively offer the equivalent of a functional cure for type 1 diabetes, replacing the insulin-producing cells lost to the autoimmune disease. However, the sheer scale required is, well, it's astronomical compared to their other assets.
We discussed OpRegen needing hundreds of thousands of cells per dose. How does the required scale for type 1 diabetes differ?
It's exponential. OpRegen for the eye requires doses in the hundreds of thousands of cells per patient. Type 1 diabetes, however, requires doses of approximately 1 billion cells per person to achieve a functional treatment effect that makes a difference in insulin independence.
1 billion cells per person.
1 billion. This massive 3 to 4 order difference in scale requires entirely new industrial approaches to culturing and differentiation that go far beyond what is needed for RPE cells or spinal cord cells.
So the key hurdle isn't the biology of making an islet cell, it's the engineering of making 1 billion of them at once, affordably.
Absolutely. Without solving this massive engineering challenge, any product would remain a niche science experiment, not a commercially viable, globally scalable therapy for a meaningful patient population. Lineage needs to prove they can produce high-purity cells at this gargantuan volume reliably.
So what's the near-term decision point for ILT1 that investors should watch for?
Lineage is aiming for an initial manufacturing feasibility decision, a crucial go-no-go determination, in Q4 2025 or Q1 2026.
The go-no-go!
Yes, and this decision won't be about clinical trial readiness or efficacy. It is purely focused on determining if they can solve this biological and engineering hurdle and create a commercially viable production modality capable of supplying billions of cells affordably. If they succeed here, they unlock the largest potential market in their pipeline. If they fail, they cut the program before wasting vast sums on clinical trials they can't support commercially.
That transition from high-stakes science to enormous market potential brings us to the structural risks. We've defined the scientific and financial risks, but LCTX is exposed to high-impact external contingencies, geopolitical and legal, that are simply unavoidable for this business. We have to be impartial but explicit about the materiality of these factors.
That's right. And one of the most significant and unique risks associated with LCTX is geopolitical concentration. All cell banking and product manufacturing are conducted at their CGMP facility in Jerusalem, Israel.
So the entire production pipeline, the foundation of their allogeneic mode, is geographically concentrated in a high-risk operational area. That's a massive contingency risk.
It is. This exposes Lineage to the ongoing regional conflict, including potential disruption to logistics, physical damage to the specialized facility, and the acute risk of key scientific or manufacturing employee call-up to the military reserves.
Which could shut them down overnight.
Potentially. Management has business continuity plans, of course, but any long-term closure or significant disruption to that single facility would materially and adversely impact all clinical and commercial programs simultaneously.
And are there financial or regulatory ties that complicate moving that manufacturing base, even if the situation warranted it?
Yes, there are significant constraints tying them to that location. Lineage has received grants from the Israel Innovation Authority, the IIA, to support R&D. The terms of those grants require manufacturing to remain in Israel.
So they're locked in.
To a degree. To transfer the technology or the vital manufacturing know-how outside of the country, Lineage would have to pay a substantial and potentially prohibitive redemption fee to the IIA. This regulatory constraint directly ties the manufacturing location, and thus the company's entire operating engine, to regional stability and policy.
If the geopolitical situation isn't enough, there is also a critical legal hurdle directly threatening the company's most valuable asset, OpRegen. We need to detail the Hadasit lawsuit.
This is a major contingent liability that investors must monitor with extreme prejudice. The lawsuit was filed by Hadasit Bioholdings Ltd., which challenges an internal transfer agreement that conveyed the crucial OpRegen rights from the subsidiary company, CCN, to Lineage itself.
And what's their argument?
Hadasit alleges that the original intercompany agreement was not fairly priced when the rights were transferred years ago, potentially undervaluing Hadasit's interest in the asset.
And what evidence supports Hadasit's claim, making this more than just a nuisance suit?
The situation escalated significantly when a third-party valuation firm, which was retained to assess the fairness of the transaction, reported its opinion in June 2025 that the consideration paid by Lineage to its subsidiary was in fact insufficient.
A third party agreed with them.
Yes. This finding significantly raises the stakes in the litigation because it provides a quantitative basis for Hadasit's claim, and there's a deadline. The critical deadline for a potential settlement is January 4, 2026.
That deadline is looming. If the matter is not settled by January 4th, what are the material risks to the company and OpRegen?
If they fail to settle, the court will hold a hearing on Hadasit's motion. The outcome could be highly volatile. It could require Lineage to enter into a new, far more expensive licensing agreement with Hadasit, or in a worst-case scenario, it could materially impact the actual ownership structure of the OpRegen asset, the very asset that underpins the entire $670 million Roche collaboration. Alternatively, it could simply force Lineage to record a major financial liability accrual, impacting their cash position or runway. Given that OpRegen is the core validation engine for the whole platform, this legal outcome is perhaps the single most important non-clinical risk facing the company in the near term.
So what does this all mean? We have unprecedented durable clinical data in a massive market and a proven funding strategy to expand the pipeline efficiently. But we are looking at a highly leveraged valuation supported by major external risks that are entirely out of management's control.
That tension defines the entire investment assessment. We have to weigh whether the bull case, that is the sheer validation expected from Roche's public advancement of OpRegen, which would unlock that critical $37 million in non-dilutive capital,
Right.
combined with the successful externally funded pipeline model, exemplified by the WDI funding and the potential SURAM grant, justifies the high 20.0x price-to-book speculative valuation.
Let's pause on that valuation. A price-to-book of 20 is massive. The sector median is typically around, 2.8 for biotechs? Why is the market willing to tolerate a nearly seven-fold premium?
The market is pricing LCTX not as a single asset biotech, but as a validated platform company. That 20 times price to book reflects the market's enthusiasm for the core technology being applicable across 3 or 4 massive addressable markets: AMD, SCI, hearing loss, type 1 diabetes.
So investors are betting that OpRegen proves the platform works.
And the successful application of the non-dilutive funding strategy proves they can affordably capitalize on that platform.
Yeah.
If OpRegen fails, that 20 times valuation evaporates instantly.
And what about the bear case that balances that enormous valuation premium?
The bear case hinges entirely on those external risks we just outlined. First, there is heavy partner dependence.
Right.
Lineage cannot control the pace of OpRegen's advancement. Roche controls the clinical progression, and only Roche's decision unlocks that $37 million catalyst.
Here in the passenger seat.
Completely.
Right.
Second, the structural geopolitical legal risks, the reliance on the Jerusalem manufacturing site in a conflict zone, and the looming Hadasit lawsuit deadline of January 4, 2026 guarantee high volatility and the potential for a sudden material impact. So the stock is a pure-play bet on the allogeneic cell replacement platform being validated by Roche and subsequently applied efficiently across large markets like T1D and hearing loss using that strategic non-dilutive funding approach.
And with all these catalysts converging,
Given the confluence of the Roche decision, the CERM grant decision, and the Hadasit litigation deadline, all converging within the next 12 weeks or so, volatility is absolutely guaranteed.
the science suggests we might be witnessing the shift from managing symptoms to routinely swapping out damaged body parts for brand new living cells regenerating sight, movement, and hearing. This raises an important question. How will our whole understanding of health, maybe even our identity, change when replacement parts for the body become commonplace? And where does that leave the cost and accessibility of these potentially transformative new technologies?
Risk defined.
Portfolio protected.